Lesson 18. Yahweh rejects Saul. Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. Reading 1 Samuel 15. Objective: to show that God expects total obedience. We cannot serve him in whatsoever way we think. Background: when Israel were journeying through the wilderness, Amalek had attacked them at Rephidim and cowardly cut off the stragglers, the feeble, the faint, and the weary. Deuteronomy 25 verses 17 to 19. Joshua won a great victory over Amalek at that time, but they were not completely destroyed, and God said that he would blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under the sun. They were a wicked people. They were a challenge to Israel spiritually. Now the time had come for this to be carried out. Saul was given a command by God to go and destroy the Amalekites. Saul's commission. 1 Samuel 15 verses 1 to 5. Samuel spoke to Saul and said, "Now go and smite Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass." Verse 3. The directions were very clear. Saul was to destroy everything. God knew that future generations of Amalek would continue their enmity against his people, so Saul was told to kill everyone. Saul immediately acted and gathered his army to go out against the Amalekites. His failure. 1 Samuel 15 verses 6 to 9. Saul and his people had a great victory. They destroyed all the people except Agag the king, and they kept the best of the sheep and the oxen, and all that was good for themselves. Verses 8 to 9. But God had clearly said, destroy all that they have. Whatsoever Saul's motives were, it was not what Yahweh had commanded. He had disobeyed God's clear command. Samuel is sent to Saul. 1 Samuel 15 verses 10 to 15. The word of Yahweh came to Saul, "It repenteth me that I have set up Saul to be king." Verse 11. Samuel was so distressed that he cried all night, but in the morning he set off to find Saul. Saul had been to Carmel and set up a monument for himself. Verse 12 in the RSV version. Then gone on to Gilgal. Saul greeted Samuel enthusiastically. "Blessed be thou of Yahweh! Blessed be thou of Yahweh! I have performed the commandment of Yahweh." Verse 13. This was the direct opposite of what God had said to Samuel in the night. He said Saul had not performed his commandments. Verse 11. So Samuel queried why he could hear the sheep and the oxen. Verse 14. "What meaneth then this bleating of the sheep in mine ears, and the lowering of the oxen which I hear?" asked Samuel. Verse 14. Saul was ready with his answer, "The people." Saul immediately blamed the people and said they had spared the animals to offer to Yahweh. Basic Bible teaching. Sincerity and truth essential for salvation. There are two things essential for salvation. Joshua 24 verse 14 and John 4 verse 24. Sincerity, worshipping God with the right attitude. Truth, worshipping God in the way he commands. Even if Saul was sincere in saving the animals to sacrifice to Yahweh, this was not what God had asked for. He needed to obey God's clear instructions first. There are many good living people in the world today who sincerely do lots of good works. However, without the knowledge of God's truth and his requirements, all such actions are in vain. The gospel is the power of God unto salvation. Romans 1 verse 16. Howsoever much good we do, there can be no salvation without a correct understanding of the truth of God as laid out in the Bible. Remember Cornelius, very sincere, and did good deeds for the Jews, but he lacked the truth, and Peter was sent to preach Christ to him. So it is not enough to be kind, loving people, and very sincere in our actions. We must have a full understanding of God's commandments and obey them. Saul is rejected. 1 Samuel 15 verses 16 to 33. Samuel gave Saul the clear cause of his failure. He was once little in thine own sight, verse 17. But Saul had become lifted up in pride. God's ways really didn't matter. He put his own interpretation on God's instructions. Saul protested that he had obeyed and again blamed the people, but he was deceiving himself. He was the king, and the people were subject unto him. Samuel replied, Hath Yahweh as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, as in obeying the voice of Yahweh? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. Because thou hast rejected the word of Yahweh, he has also rejected thee from being king. Verses 22 and 23. There was no acceptable excuse for disobedience. Obedience to God's command is the most important thing, not some sacrifice we think God should be happy with. Eventually Saul's excuse was that he feared the people. Verse 24. Although he was head and shoulders above the people, he demonstrated no spiritual leadership that they could respect. Samuel had revealed an end to the reign of Saul. As he had rejected Yahweh's words, so Yahweh had rejected him from being king. As Samuel turned to leave, Saul caught hold of his cloak, and it tore in his hand. Verse 27. And it tore in his hand. Verse 27. Just like the torn coat, God had torn the kingdom away from Saul. Verse 28. For the moment Saul acknowledged his sin and wanted to worship God with Samuel, that he might be honoured before all the people. Again, man's opinion was important to Saul. Verse 30. Samuel now had a work to complete and a great lesson to teach Israel. King Agag was brought before him, and the old prophet hewed Agag in pieces before Yahweh. Verse 33. Samuel carried out God's word in the sight of all the people. Principle for living. Obey. Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. Saul was rejected because he did not obey God. There are other examples we can look at in the scriptures. Cain brought an offering, but not what God had asked. Genesis 4 verses 3 to 5. David went to a great effort to bring up the ark, but not how God had commanded. 1 Chronicles 15 verse 13 and Numbers 7 verse 9. 1 Chronicles 15 verse 13 and Numbers 7 verse 9. Both men were sincere, but God's commands are quite specific. We must obey them if we want to be saved. Baptism is the first act of obedience. Obedience is so important that children are commanded to obey their parents, because this is how we learn to obey God. Ephesians 6 verses 1 to 3. Obedience to parents is a commandment of God. Therefore it is a service to him. It is a command with promise. So then obedience is recognized and rewarded by God. It is acceptable behavior which demonstrates an attitude of respect for godly principles. Samuel leaves Saul. 1 Samuel 15, verses 34 to 35. Sadly, Samuel left Saul at this point and did not see him again. Samuel was sad because Saul had rejected him. How different it would have been if only Saul had humbled himself to obey God's words. From this point, Saul's life went downhill. God withdrew his spirit from Saul because he would not humble himself. Thus said the High and Holy One that inhabited eternity, I dwell with him also that is of a contrite and humble spirit. Isaiah 57, verse 15. Summary. Saul was commanded to fight the Amalekites and utterly destroy them. Saul and his people saved Agag the king and the best of the sheep and oxen. God sent Samuel to Saul and rejected Saul from being king. Saul blamed the people and did what they wanted instead of obeying God. We must read the Bible and obey God's commandments exactly. Samuel killed Agag in front of all the people. These lessons are the words taken from the Christadelphian Sunday School Association notes, www.cssa.asn.au, used with permission. Email your questions to readthebible2@gmail.com, and we look forward to you listening to the next lesson, which will be called David.